Lucas just signed papers on a house he does not fully own, and he walked out of that office smiling. His checking account did not grow. His net worth did anyway. A few streets over, Amelia has not borrowed a single dollar in almost a decade. She checks her credit score the way some people check a lottery number, and she is quietly going nowhere. My name is Liam, and I want to talk about why the person who owes money keeps getting richer than the person who owes nothing at all. Here is the part most finance videos skip. Lucas did not get wealthy despite his debt. He got wealthy because of it. He understood something Amelia never stopped to question, that there are two totally different categories hiding under one word, debt, and only one of them is dangerous. Today I am walking through 6 ways ordinary people use the safe category to build real wealth, and where each one can bite back if you are careless. Let us get into it. First, a disclaimer, because I do not want this taken the wrong way. When I say borrowing can build wealth, I am not talking about a credit card sitting at 29% interest on a couch you financed 2 years ago. That kind of debt is a leech. If that is your situation, everything else in this video waits until that is handled. What I am describing is a completely separate animal. Here is the simplest way to split the two. Bad debt buys things that lose value and quietly drain your account every single month. Good debt buys things that either grow in value over time or pay you for owning them. That is the entire distinction. And here is a number that surprised me the first time I saw it. You would assume wealthy households are the most leveraged people around. Federal Reserve survey data says the opposite. The richest slice of households carries debt equal to roughly 12% of what they own. A typical middle-income household carries debt above 60% of what they own. The wealthy borrow less proportionally, not more, and they still come out ahead, because it was never about the size of the loan. It was about what the loan was pointed at. Amelia absorbed one lesson early, that debt is dangerous, and she built her entire financial identity around avoiding it. Lucas heard the same warning and asked a better follow-up question, which kind? That single question is worth remembering, because by the end of this video it is worth an enormous gap in outcome. Let us start with the oldest form of leverage available to a regular income earner, real estate. Way number 1 is property, and it earns the top spot because it is the most accessible serious leverage a normal person can actually access. When Lucas buys a rental, he is not paying for the whole property. He puts down 20%, and a lender covers the remaining 80%. Here is the part that trips people up. He still keeps the entire gain. Picture a property priced at $250,000. Lucas puts down $50,000. The property rises a modest 5% that year, which is $12,500. Paid in cash outright, that is a 5% return, forgettable. But Lucas did not pay in cash. He put in $50,000, so that same $12,500 gain is a 25% return on his actual money. Same house, same market, same year. He multiplied his return 5 times over using someone else's capital, and that is before a tenant moves in and starts paying down his mortgage balance every month with their own paycheck. Run that forward 10 years. That single property could be worth roughly $340,000. The loan balance has fallen to around $166,000. Lucas's equity, his actual slice, sits near $180,000, grown from an original $50,000 down payment, largely funded by a tenant's income. Now the honest warning, because leverage cuts in both directions, and I am not interested in anyone emailing me from a courtroom. That same multiplier works in reverse. If the property drops 20% instead of climbing, Lucas's entire $50,000 down payment is gone. That is not a hypothetical scenario. It happened broadly in 2008, when a wave of over-leveraged owners watched their equity vanish, while their loan obligations stayed exactly the same. Leverage does not care how you feel about it. Bought carefully and held through the rough years, it is a genuine wealth engine. Lucas can even refinance later, pull his original $50,000 back out completely tax-free because a loan is not taxable income, and deploy that same money into a second property. Investors call this cycle buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. He is not saving up a fresh down payment each time, he is recycling one. Meanwhile, Amelia is saving toward paying cash for a single rental property sometime around retirement age. By the time she gets there, Lucas already owns half a dozen. Which brings us to the second way, quietly one of the most powerful tools on this list, using debt to acquire an existing business. Let me lead with the scary part this time, so nobody accuses me of hiding it. Businesses fail often, roughly half within 5 years and around 2/3 within 10. With that warning fully stated, here is why this remains one of the most reliable paths to everyday wealth. Most people assume you have to build a business from nothing, survive on ramen for years, and hope. You do not have to. You can buy one that already has paying customers and an existing profit, largely using borrowed money. Government-backed small business loans allow a regular buyer to purchase a cash-flowing business with as little as 10% down. Picture an unglamorous but reliable operation, a laundromat or a plumbing route, earning $200,000 a year and priced at $800,000. The buyer does not need $800,000, they need roughly $80,000. The loan covers the rest, and the business's own profit retires that loan over time. The asset pays for itself. Put in $80,000, and the thing you bought generates the cash that clears the debt you used to buy it. Loan paid off, and you own an $800,000 cash-flowing business for a fraction of the sticker price. At a much larger scale with far more legal complexity, this is essentially what a leveraged buyout is. Borrow most of the purchase price. Let the acquired company's own earnings pay down that debt. Buying an existing profitable business tilts the odds in your favor compared to starting from nothing, because you are purchasing proven cash flow rather than a hope and a logo. Tilted odds are not guaranteed odds though, and if that business's revenue dries up, the loan payment still arrives every month regardless. The line Amelia never crossed was believing you needed a pile of money to own a business. For Lucas, the business itself became the source of the money. Way number 3 gets a little more advanced, and it is the one wealthy households lean on the hardest: borrowing against assets instead of selling them. Say Lucas has spent years building a portfolio of real estate and investments, now worth $5 million, originally funded with $1 million of his own money. If he sells to access that gain, he owes capital gains tax on $4 million of profit, a bill that could land near $950,000. Instead of selling, he can approach a lender and offer that $5 million portfolio as collateral for a loan. At an interest rate around 6%, borrowing $3 million costs about $180,000 a year in interest. Compare the two numbers, $950,000 in tax if he sells versus $180,000 in interest if he borrows, and his $5 million stays fully invested and growing the entire time. Borrowed money is not classified as income, so there is no tax on receiving it at all. Here is the part that turns this into a multi-generational strategy. When the asset owner eventually passes away, heirs inherit those investments at their current value under a provision called step-up in basis, meaning the built-up gains from decades earlier are erased for tax purposes. The estate settles any outstanding loan, the family keeps the remainder, and that deferred tax bill simply never arrives. This is not an obscure trick. It mirrors how a number of extremely wealthy individuals structure access to their own net worth, borrowing against shares rather than selling them. Should an average investor try this casually on margin this week? Please do not. This particular tool has real teeth. If markets fall and collateral value drops, lenders issue a margin call demanding repayment at the worst possible moment, potentially forcing a sale directly into a downturn. The underlying principle is still worth understanding though. To a wealthy household, selling is treated as a last resort, and borrowing is treated as the first option. Way number 4 is one your own parents may have benefited from without ever fully realizing it: borrowing cheaply to invest at a higher return, while inflation quietly does part of the work for free. The logic runs like this. If a mortgage is locked at a rate around 3%, and stock markets have historically returned closer to 10% annually over long periods, then every dollar not rushed toward paying off that mortgage early, and instead invested, is capturing that gap. Borrow at 3, earn near 10, and that spread compounds in your favor for decades. This is exactly why financially experienced households are often in no rush to eliminate a low-rate mortgage. Amelia sent every spare dollar toward her mortgage because, in her words, debt is bad. Lucas kept the inexpensive loan and invested the difference instead, And across 30 years, that single decision compounds into a substantial gap in outcome. This only works, to be fully honest, if the investor stays invested through the difficult years instead of selling in a panic during a downturn. The spread rewards patience and punishes overreaction. Here is the detail almost nobody appreciates, though. Inflation quietly pays down fixed debt on your behalf. Someone with a locked mortgage payment sees that exact dollar figure stay frozen for 30 years, while their salary, rent prices, and everyday costs all rise around it. A $2,000 monthly payment feels significant in year one. 3 decades later, after years of rising wages and prices, that same $2,000 is a comparatively small amount. The number on the bill never moved. The value of a dollar simply shrank around it, and the debt became easier to carry every year without the borrower doing anything at all. Economic researchers have studied this directly. Inflation quietly transfers value from lenders toward borrowers holding a fixed rate. The largest beneficiary of this exact mechanism happens to be governments carrying enormous amounts of fixed-rate debt, which inflation gradually erodes in real terms. Way number 5 is the least exciting one to describe out loud and one of the most valuable to actually use: borrowing in the specific way the tax code rewards. Here is a rule quietly running the whole system. Interest paid on a credit card or a car loan is not tax deductible. That cost is absorbed entirely by the borrower. Interest paid on a loan tied to a rental property or a business is often deductible, meaning a portion of that cost is offset. The same basic action, borrow money and pay interest, is treated completely differently depending on what it funded. Then there is depreciation, a rule that lets a property owner deduct a portion of a building's value every year as if it were wearing down, even while the property is actually rising in value. On a $275,000 building, that can be roughly $10,000 a year in deductions claimed, without spending an additional real dollar. Combine deductible interest with depreciation, and someone in a 30% tax bracket holding $20,000 in total write-offs is keeping around $6,000 that would otherwise go to taxes every single year on an asset that is simultaneously growing in value. Recent tax legislation restored a provision allowing businesses to write off the full cost of certain purchases in the very first year, and paired with a technique called cost segregation, serious real estate investors can front-load enormous deductions, sometimes offsetting most of their taxable income in the year they buy. A quick honest note here, tax law changes frequently, so anything this specific is worth confirming with a professional before acting on it. Notice the pattern underneath all 5 of these. None of it is hidden. It is written directly into public tax code and lending rules. The system simply rewards the person who borrows to build or acquire a productive asset over the person who borrows to buy something that only loses value. Which brings us to the 6th way, less a specific tactic and more the single idea sitting underneath the other 5. Every one of those strategies is really the same motion repeated. Use someone else's money to control an asset you could not have purchased outright, and let that asset do the heavy lifting over time. Real estate, an acquired business, a leveraged portfolio, an inexpensive mortgage spread, tax-advantaged property debt. Strip away the details, and it is one underlying move. Borrow, point it at something that grows or generates income, and let time compound the gap. This idea reaches beyond the 5 specific examples too. Education can absolutely be good debt, with one large condition: the income increase has to actually show up. $40,000 borrowed for a nursing credential that adds $30,000 a year in income is one of the strongest financial trades available. $40,000 borrowed for a degree that leads back to the same job is simply an expensive certificate. There is also seller financing, where a business owner allows a buyer to pay them over time directly out of the business's own profits. No traditional lender involved at all. A franchise loan, a credit line against equipment that earns more than it costs. Different packaging every time. One shared idea underneath all of it. So here is the single question this entire video compresses down to. One you can ask yourself standing in a checkout line. Is this borrowed money buying me an asset or a liability? Is it about to put money into my pocket or pull money out of it? That one question decides almost everything. A boat is usually a liability. A rental duplex is usually an asset. An expensive watch is a liability. A profitable small business is an asset. Rate and terms genuinely matter, but that first question, decides most of the outcome before the paperwork is even signed. I also have to be honest about the uncomfortable part, because this is exactly where finance videos tend to start exaggerating. You can do every single one of these 6 things correctly and still end up losing money. It is easy to admire the people who leverage their way into a fortune while quietly forgetting the ones who leverage their way into a financial crater. For every success story like the one described here, there is an equally real version of that same person who bought at the wrong time, borrowed beyond their cushion, hit a rough stretch, and did not recover. Broad market research consistently shows more than half of individual stocks actually lose money across their entire lifetime. So, survivorship in these stories is genuinely worth remembering. So, how do you stay closer to the wealth building side of this and further from the wreckage side? A good debt decision generally needs to satisfy 4 conditions at once. First, the spread has to be real. The asset purchased actually has to reasonably out-earn the cost of the loan. Second, it has to be an appreciating or income-generating asset, not a depreciating item wearing an investment costume. Third, the leverage has to be survivable, with enough of a cushion that a difficult year bends your finances instead of breaking them completely. Fourth, the payments have to continue through the rough patches, because rough patches always eventually arrive, and a loan does not pause itself out of sympathy. Miss any single one of those 4 conditions, and good debt quietly turns back into the dangerous kind. And to be clear, Amelia is not doing anything foolish. She never paid a cent of high-interest credit card interest. She saved consistently every single month. She sleeps easily at night, and if someone watching this is currently carrying expensive consumer debt, her cautious approach is genuinely the right medicine to apply first, before anything else in this video. But avoiding debt and building wealth are 2 separate projects, and she quietly mistook one for the other. The money she kept so carefully protected grew only modestly over a decade, and after accounting for rising prices, it barely held its purchasing power at all. Lucas took that same original instinct, aimed it at productive assets instead of avoidance, and turned one down payment into a meaningfully larger amount, then repeated the process several times over. The gap between these 2 outcomes was never about courage, luck, or income level. Debt itself is simply a tool. In careless hands, it becomes a trap. Aimed carefully at the right kind of asset, it becomes one of the most powerful and most publicly available tools an ordinary income earner can actually use to build real wealth over